Muslims take an aggressive stance against Islamophobia and urge the international community to impose new regulations to sanction intolerance of people because of their religious convictions. But what can be done to quell the fear of Islam? Hello, I'm Hashim Ahbarra and welcome to this special edition of Inside Story from Dakar. The republication of cartoons depicting Prophet Muhammad and plans by Dutch right-wingers to release a film labeling the Quran, Islam's most sacred book, fascist, have thrown Islamophobia back into the spotlight. Muslim leaders have recently agreed to take a tougher stance on Islamophobia. They want the West to act swiftly.
Combating Islamophobia is and will continue to be one of the biggest challenges faced by the Muslim world. And we need concrete efforts in this area now more than ever.
The time has come for action. Muslim leaders fear Islamophobia has reached alarming proportions. Attacks by extremists have tarnished the image of Islam, and Muslims in the West feel they are paying the price. The implementation of tough anti-terror laws in many countries has left Muslims feeling they are targeted. Today in Europe, Muslims are more likely to be stopped and searched than followers of other religions. The number of violent attacks on Muslims is also rising. Again, Muslims accuse Western governments of not doing enough to protect them. Outrage followed the republication by Danish newspapers of cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad. Such illustrations are prohibited in Islam. But officials from leading Western countries don't feel it's all doom and gloom.
There's lots of advances in the UK which actually challenge the myth that Islamophobia is rife in the UK. Of course it exists, but we've got to keep it in context and perspective in the same way that sexism exists and racism more generally. These are all evils and they have no place in a decent society, either an Islamic society or a non-Islamic society.
We are focused on bringing freedom, stability, prosperity. Now, isn't that a message that needs to be accepted? And that's one of the reasons I'm here and I'm aggressively bringing this message is that once this misperception is cleared, then we can move forward.
Some believe Islamophobia is self-inflicted, claiming Muslim leaders are not doing enough to battle extremism and convey the sensitivity of Islamic issues. Despite being labeled a talking shop, this is what the organization of the Islamic Conference wants to change. The body of over 50 Muslim countries plans to engage Western governments and eradicate Islamophobia at its root. The hope for people of different religions to respect each other and recognize the fine line between freedom of expression and religious vilification. For Inside Story, Sohail Malik, Al Jazeera.
Joining us to discuss the issue of Islamophobia, our guest, Mr. Lulzim Basha, Foreign Minister of Albania, and Mr. Humayatuddin, OIC Ambassador and Specialist on Islamophobia. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, gentlemen. Let me start by asking Mr. Lulzim Basha, Foreign Minister of Albania, how serious is the issue of Islamophobia?
Albania, of course, is a country in Europe, a country where its Muslim culture and Muslim population cohabitates in an unprecedented track record in its history with the other two main religions throughout its history, where the perception of Islam, of Albanian Islam and European Islam, has throughout this period of time been a positive one, a constructive one, but where, of course, over the past, especially during the turbulent period of the Balkan inter-ethnic wars, the perception of Islam has been unjustly tainted by those who are trying to stir inter-ethnic and inter-religious rhetoric to their own advantage, primarily for the agendas, for the narrow agendas of political cliques who are clinging on to power and trying to enhance power through a rhetoric of inciting inter-religious and inter-ethnic hatred. However, we strongly believe that proclaiming the true values of Islam, just like the true values of any other confession, and making it clear that whatever extremist or radical behavior is demonstrated in the world, whether coming from the so-called Islamic fundamentalists or from those who are acting against the so-called Islamic fundamentalists, are portrayed as behaviors that, although are drawing motivation from religion, have nothing to do with the basic values of religion, be that Islam or Christianity, and those are values of love, of peace and understanding.
Mr. Himayatuddin, why has it become suddenly a top priority for the Organization of Islamic Conference?
Well, it is only natural because the Organization of the Islamic Conference has been established, apart from other reasons, also to uphold the interests of Islam. And as you know very well, that the phenomenon of Islamophobia has now gone beyond its definition of, and it's no longer a phobia, but it has taken a new form of sort of a new form of racial discrimination, if you may. Racism or xenophobic tendencies that have taken over, of intolerance, of hatred, of incitement to disturb global peace in society, cohabitation, not only within the society but also beyond. And we think that it is no longer a concern which is just limited for the Muslim countries, but it has gone beyond, and it is a concern for the entire international community. And that is why the OIC is very much concerned about it.
What we need to know, is it a political issue or a religious one, or just simply a cultural one? Mr. Lulzim, you're part of the EU. We've seen what happened recently as a reaction, for example, to the independence of Kosovo. They were referring to you, for example, in the newspapers and the media as neighbouring. Do you think that it's a politically motivated issue or what?
No, we strongly believe that this is a matter of prejudice. Prejudice which is generated either as a result of ignorance or as a result of the readiness of initially marginalized, but if allowed the space, increasingly populist movements. And it is the duty of politicians, as well as the duty of the civil societies, to make their best to marginalize elements who are trying to use and misuse religion in order to advance narrow political agendas. In the issue of Kosovo and Kosovo's independence, of course, it is very important to state from the outset that the people of Kosovo, while exercising their right, and the process itself coming at the end of the dissolution of a country, the former Yugoslavia, they also reinstated fervently their belief in basic human rights, in interethnic and interreligious tolerance. And I would like to particularly remind your public and your audience today that the Ahtisaari plan, which is being implemented in Kosovo, offers minorities, including the Serb minority, unparalleled rights, geographically and historically. There is no minority in the face of the earth or in the history of civilization that enjoys the kind of rights that the Ahtisaari plan offers to all minorities, including the Christian Orthodox Serb minority. At the same time, it is very important, as we focus our attention on these phenomena that have publicly sometimes tarnished the image of Islam, that we emphasize the good side of the people who have been practicing this faith for a long time.
And you think Kosovo can be a very good example
I think
to
it
promote?
could be an excellent example. I think Kosovo and Albania, my own country, could be an excellent example. Let me remind you that these two countries, European countries, during the Second World War, ended up at the end of that war with a bigger number of Jews than at the beginning of the war. A trend that was completely reversed in every other country. In all of European countries, we saw massive expulsion, atrocities committed to their Jewish populations. And in Albania, we ended up at the end of the war having a population of Jews about 9 times bigger than before the war. The culture of tolerance, the culture of love, the culture of respect for the guest are elements that have to be trumpeted much stronger than those elements that biased and not so careful observers are sometimes trumpeting about the values of religion, in this case Islam.
Mr. Himayatuddin, the cartoons depicting Prophet Muhammad, you have denounced the cartoons in the past. Are you engaging now the international community, mainly the EU, to tackle the issue?
Yes, we are, because you see I need not have to stress on the uproar that was created, not really the uproar, but the turmoil that was created in the original publication of the cartoons, of the blasphemous cartoons, in 2005 in the Danish newspapers. And you know that at the third Extraordinary Summit in Makkah in 2005, the the heads of, of government and state of the OIC member countries, when they met in Makkah in 2005, they undertook a 10-year plan of action to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And among that, in that plan of action, there were, among the many actions that were there were 2 or 3 significant points. One was that to counter Islamophobia, and number 2 was to create an observatory to monitor Islamophobic acts and take countering measures. And the third was to engage in a dialogue, or to sort of project the true message of Islam with other civilizations, engage in a dialogue. And as you know, that the dialogue of civilization, the concept is not something new, which has been it was introduced by the OIC as early as 1996. And since then, the OIC has been very, I mean, the observatory that has been created, and indeed we at the OIC, I head that observatory, in the sense that we have a team which monitors the various acts information that comes from us. And of recent times, there are certain which concern, which are issues of concern, because we feel that these are not only acts of intolerance, but these are designed to incite and to provoke unrest, to provoke hatred, to provoke
in the world.
Racism, racist sort of a thing. And this has to be addressed to in a collective form.
Okay, about the collective approach to this issue, let me ask Mr. Luzin Basha, what do you tell your European counterparts about this issue? I think it's going to be delicate. You're Muslim, you're dealing with a predominantly secular continent, where the freedom of expression is tantamount to the livelihood of people. What's the best way you think should be dealt with?
But before, if I may intervene, because I didn't complete my sentence, because your question was whether we are engaged with the Europeans. Yes, we are. The Secretary General has taken upon himself to engage with the European Union, the European Presidency, the European Council for Monitoring Racism and Intolerance, and the various think tanks in the West, and the OSC. The basic purpose was, number 1 was to sensitize and raise awareness of the dangerous implications of Islamophobia. Number 2 is to gain their cooperation in addressing this issue through a dialogue which would come out with some results.
Okay.
To come back to your question, let me first also emphasize that Albania is a secular republic, where the 3 main religions, Christian Orthodoxy, Roman Catholics, which are the minority religions, and the Muslim religion, have cohabited in a peaceful and tolerant way for times immemorial. There has never been not even an incident of interreligious conflict in Albania throughout its long history. The values of the secular values of our democratic republic, which are also the values of the continent, the values of the Union, which we aspire to become part of, are values which are based on a full respect of each other's religious freedoms, including here the freedom to exercise your religion openly and without restriction, but just as well the freedom of speech. Now, the freedom of speech has been a matter of interpretation for a long time, not only by governments across Europe, by their courts, by the European Court of Human Rights, and this is the debate that will continue for a long time. There are many balances in this debate. One of the most interesting one is, where does this freedom of speech, does the freedom of speech has a border? And is this border defined by the freedom of expression of the individual, or the freedom of expression of society, or other interests? In this case, for instance, interests of public order, or interests of security in a society. I think this is a debate that will continue, and it will be ongoing in Europe. Europe has a way of confronting these issues in an open way, without inhibitions. But at the same time, I think everybody should be careful not to read too quickly and too hurriedly, or to prejudice too quickly or too hurriedly. And this is valuable for both sides. Europe is a continent comprised of countries which have proclaimed freedom of religion to be one of their fundamental principles. Millions of Muslims live and work today in Europe as part of immigrants who have moved to those areas, but sometimes also who have been living in those areas, like in the southeastern Europe. And the values of this religion, which again are the values of love, of tolerance, of peace, and the values for which European Union and European countries stay today, are fully in harmony with each other.
So, but still you have the Europeans saying, on the other hand, at least some voices, Muslims need to tackle, first of all, their own issues before tackling Islamophobia. There are problems of terrorism, violence, which seem to be inherent
This is very unfair, because you see, terrorism has nothing to do with Muslims. You have to, this message has to go across very peacefully. As the minister has also said, that Islam is a religion which is based on the basis is compassion, peaceful living, and whatever good philosophies are there to live in a society. So the message is I mean, and as you know, as I said, that the statement that came out from the Makkah conference, there was a very, very strong statement from the heads of government against terrorism. And you know, the 1.3 billion Muslims in the world, and the Muslim countries, the OIC member countries, are active and strong and partners of the fight, of the global fight against terrorism. So it would be a very, very wrong perception to bring the two. I mean, you have acts either this way or that way. I mean, there are proponents who, I mean, terror has very many, I mean, it has never been defined to the extent as to what exactly terrorism is. And you can, anything could be terror. So, you know, to bring any connection between terrorism is certainly not acceptable to us. But let me tell you one thing, that the reports that have come out from various credible Western European institutions like the UNC report, the ECRI report, the Pew Research Center report on America, and more recently the Washington First Human Rights report on especially on a specific country or Netherlands. All of these indicate of the growing trend of Islamophobia incident, where Muslims are being negatively stereotyped, profiled, and as I said, that you know, these have these are going beyond the question of phobia, the fear aspect of it. So there has to be, as I said, that you know, we are trying to engage in with all the countries, with all various institutions, bringing not only there has to be, number one, what we believe is a political commitment for a dialogue. The dialogue, not for the dialogue itself, but a political commitment to make the dialogue go to an extent where there will be historical reconciliation between within the West and the Muslim countries. That's number one. Second is that, you know, there has to be a legal instrument which has to bring a point where freedom of expression, which is sacrosanct, we believe in freedom of expression, but freedom of expression cannot be an instrument which can be abused to cause insult, hurt, and then incite, which has a implication that has of dangerous proportions, and that affects everyone.
Mr. Lulzim, you're sort of voice of the OIC in the EU, in the sense that now you will have to take into account the issues which will be addressed at the Charter of the OIC. Many say that the Islamophobia has considerably risen after 9/11 and the US-led war on terror. What can the EU do about this issue? Because there's a lot of political thing going on there.
I think a lot has to be done on both sides. Certainly perception, which is very important in the age of mass media that we live in, Al Jazeera being a primary example of that age. Perception is very important. Perception can become reality, even when it does not reflect reality. I just said that in Europe they cherish the freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is cherished by all Europeans, Christians, Muslims, of other faiths. It is one of the fundamental pillars on which European societies are based. Even when this goes contrary to some of the wishes of the people that compose Europe, including here, for instance, representatives of the Christian clergy, who often, much more often, although not in the visibility that it enjoys now, have been faced with consequences of the expression of freedom of expression vis-à-vis religious liturgy or religious figures, including primary figures of Christianity, like Jesus Christ or saints. European societies have somehow grown immune of this. You can call it secularization, or you can call it a balance of values, where, as I said, freedom of expression is riding very high. There is another dimension to which one cannot be blind. You mentioned 9/11. You mentioned many events that have taken place since then, where terror seems to be the central word. Terror, terrorists, fighting terror. I would like to also say that in this regard there is an ongoing debate whether terror is an enemy or a means. There are those who are saying that terror is a means of projecting political goals, but that at the heart of these political goals or political problems lie a variety of different issues, whose uniting thread, if there is a uniting thread, it's far from being religion and far from being Islam.
So now, what do you want to achieve at the OIC, for example? Do you want Islamophobia to be taken as a form of racism, criminalized at the UN, or what exactly?
You see, the initiatives taken by the OIC Observatory and the Secretary General in engaging in a dialogue at the political level, and also including the civil society and the NGOs, I think has started to begin to have an impact in the global society. As you know, apart from the positive reports that have come out from various statements and that have come out from various political leaders and in the Western countries, and one of the examples that I can cite is the very example of the United States appointing a special envoy to the OIC speaks of the aspect that there is now a general consensus of coming to some there has to be a meeting point, a dialogue where to address this issue. And the latest also one of the development in the Vatican of the initiative taken by His Holiness the Pope is another. And these have come out from the initiatives that we have taken, the OIC has taken, which we believe have taken in sensitizing the issue, the dangers of the issue. So what we would want is that we would want that to engage, to resort to the international instruments, the UN resolutions, the international covenants, all these things to bring about a binding sort of a resolution on defamation against defamation religion. That would put that at a point a restriction on the freedom of expression, that freedom of expression cannot go on to incite hatred, create.
And my last question is going to be to Mr. Lulzim Basha. Your country will host the interfaith dialogue. What can it bring to this momentum building up in the Islamic world?
We are proud of our history of interconfessional tolerance. It is a unique history for the entire world, certainly for Europe, and even more so for Southeastern Europe, which has been the scene in the past two decades of interethnic and interreligious conflicts that have brought so many sufferings on its people. Now we strongly believe that the time is to move forward and to leave our past behind, to build on our common values and our common bridges that bring together all the people in the world, irrelevant of their religious belonging or their ethnic belonging. And in this regard, we believe that our positive example, illustrated in many ways during our long history, can help to promote this momentum amongst the people of Southeast Europe, amongst cultures, East and West, North and South, of Europe, Asia, Africa and further. And this is going to be the aim of the Interconfessional Dialogue Conference that Albania is going to host in the framework of the Alliance of Civilizations, an initiative of Turkey and Spain under the auspices of the United Nations in October in Tirana.
Mr. Lulzim Basha, Foreign Minister of Albania, thank you very much indeed. Mr. Hurriyat Himayatuddin, Organization of Islamic Conference Ambassador and Specialist in Islamophobia, thank you very much indeed. And thank you for watching Inside Story. We welcome your suggestions and comments at the following address which appears on the screen, insidestory@aljazeera.net. Goodbye for now.